You're listening to TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour with your host, the Director of Dixie Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
It's always great to be behind the golden Dixie Heritage microphone to bring you another episode of TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. For the 3 years now that I've been the editor of the Dixie Heritage Letter, it's amazed me almost weekly to find out who is reading the Dixie Heritage Letter, who are our subscribers. Here recently I found out that one of our subscribers is the ever-popular blogger, Dissident Mama. The Dissident Mama blog has becoming more and more popular in the last months and year or so. And come to find out that Rebecca, the Dissident Mama, is one of our faithful subscribers and faithful readers. And so I reached out to Rebecca and I asked her, I said, how would you like to be on TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour? She said, I'd absolutely love it. And so I called Rebecca and we recorded an interview. And we had a great conversation. We started out talking about school teachers of all things. Rebecca is a homeschooler. And at the time that we recorded the interview, her kids were home on spring break. And so we were talking about spring break and how the teachers were getting the week off as well as the kids. And she was talking about, being a homeschool mother, that, you really don't get time off like regular teachers do. Anyways, we'll pick up the interview in the middle of our conversation on school teachers. I'm kind of politically incorrect anyways.
Really? Yeah. I couldn't tell. Me too.
Yeah. And I used to be a school teacher.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing is when all of the other teachers were complaining that they didn't get paid enough and needed a raise.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was the best job I'd ever had in my life, pay-wise.
There you go.
I mean, I was making $172 a day.
Wow.
And this was back in the 90s.
Yeah, that was good pay for back then.
Yeah. And so they're saying, oh, we only make, $30,000 a year. But I was a starting year teacher, and my pay broke down to $172 per working day.
Yeah.
It's like you don't get that kind of pay anywhere else.
I know. And then you get the summers off, and they say, oh, we have to do the extra, learning in the summer and take the workshops and stuff. I'm like, you still have the summer off. Yeah. That's pretty good.
And there's all kinds of other things you could do as a teacher to make extra money, too. You could coach. You could do after-hours stuff. I mean, it's just crazy, but...
Well, it's easier to complain, as we know.
Yes. Just think, if you lived in West Virginia, all the kids would be out of school. But anyways, that's a different story.
Yes.
I guess tell us your journey. I know you had gone on your website. You talk about how you had gone from being a liberal to the politically incorrect person that you are today. I guess... tell us that journey a little bit.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia by, I would call them Reagan Republicans. I didn't have a very strict upbringing, but, my dad was always listening to Rush Limbaugh in the shed and, that kind of thing. Politics didn't come up that much, but my parents, God bless them, instilled in me self-esteem and stubbornness, which I guess that's an innately Southern thing, which is a good thing if it's used in the right way. So I wasn't, political in high school like most kids used to not be, trained to be activists or anything. So I was just, this normal kid.
Let me ask you a crazy question. What years were you in high school?
I started in 85 and graduated in 89.
Okay, because I was in high school from 86 to 90.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And Rush Limbaugh started his national radio show in 1988.
Yeah.
And in 88, 89, and 90, the way my schedule worked, I would skip a class, I would skip lunch, and I would skip study hall.
Right.
And I would go out to my car and I would listen to Rush on the radio every day.
Oh, well, you were getting a better education out in your car, I assume.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, so, high school, whatever, just a normal kid. But that was kind of, the 90s is really when I think, personally, for me, political correctness really took off. I mean, that's when like, you know, the NAACP started the like anti-flag thing. It's when, you know, I don't know. It just started to become really immersed in even like normal people's lives. You know, everybody was recycling and, you know, people were trying not to say certain words. And I don't know, it just started to really blossom and take hold in the 90s. We know it started earlier, but I feel like for normal people, it started to kind of like immerse themselves in their own lives, in their homes, and in their conversations. So anyway, I was late to go to college. I went to all these colleges and partied too much. I was a little wild. And then finally I got serious and I was like, I want to be a journalist. I want to change the world, right? And I didn't want to report the facts. I wanted to change the world. And I went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison. They call it Berkeley with cows, and that's pretty much what it is. It is extremely progressive, always has been, and in the 90s. And so I majored in journalism, minored in women's studies. And the reason I say like the political correctness thing really started to take root was because I was told things in college that are, you know, people hear them all the time now, you know, white privilege, you know, marriage is an oppressive institution, all these things. But I hadn't heard that before. So in the 90s, I'm like, this is truth. It's been hidden from me my whole life. And so I just dove into the deep end of feminism and socialism and all that kind of thing. And, you know, I say I was a socialist, but I still worked really hard and never asked for a handout. So I don't know if I was technically a socialist. You know, I'm thinking these things are truth. You know, that the veil has come off, and because nobody was really talking about it to the extent that I was learning about it. And then I just, you know, kind of got all wrapped up in it. But the interesting thing is, back to my parents, was my parents said, I guess, instilled in me like this classical liberalism. You know, I really believed in freedom. And one of the reasons I voted Democrat and thought I was a socialist, I thought that meant freedom, like the classical liberal definition. I believed in people being free and live and let live and left alone. I just thought the tools to get there were the very wrong tools. So that's what I think makes me different than the feminists today, who are, you know, really Marxists, and they always have been too, but I was duped into thinking they were something nice and just wanted to not be treated like doormats and all that kind of thing. But they don't believe in freedom. You know, I mean, it is abundantly clear that, you know, modern Marxists and feminists just think freedom is, you know, a tool of dead white guys and colonial oppression and all this kind of thing. And so that's my new angle when I talk to people. I come at this on the offensive and not the defensive. So say, you know, you want to talk about the war between the states. I don't think people should even have an opinion on slavery if they don't believe in freedom. So I don't even try to have that conversation with people, because that puts me at a disadvantage to defending something that I think is honorable and noble and obviously so much bigger than, you know, slavery. So that's kind of where I am. So to get from the crazy UW feminist to where I am today, 9/11 kind of shook me up a little bit. I married a guy who was very smart. He was not as leftist as me. Just being married and thinking about having kids and thinking about the meaning of the world, we became Christians, we had kids, and being a parent, it changes everything. It is a game changer. And so that was all from like 2001 to where we are now. Me going from kind of like, you know, limited government Republican girl to, you know, kind of like radical, I know, possibly anarcho-capitalist. I don't really know what I am now. I just know that what we have now doesn't work. Smaller government is better, and people just want to be left alone and live their lives. So that's kind of where I am now.
So when you met your husband, when you got married, you were left of your husband.
Mm-hmm.
Is it safe to say now that you are right of your husband, or are the two of you on about the same page? Or
we're about the same page, which is wonderful. You know, sometimes you think, how much is God actually like participating in my daily life? You know, is he just watching? What I really think God put us together for a reason, because, you know, first of all, going from atheism to Christianity can kill a marriage. You know, if one person's a Christian and the other isn't, that is extremely hard. I don't know how people do that. And then, of course, the, you know, politicization of, our evolution from wherever we were to, I think, right-thinking people. I don't understand how you could be married to someone who wasn't like-minded, at least on most issues. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on a lot. And sometimes I'm a little more radical and he pulls me back in. Okay. And sometimes he's a little out there. But together, I think we kind of make a good team as far as just being smart how to navigate this crazy world we live in.
So did you grow up in a non-religious home, or did you grow up in a Christian home and chose atheism?
It was, we called ourselves Catholics, but we didn't go to church. I had gone to private Catholic school till I think about second grade. So I left in, I don't know, the mid-70s. But the whole reason my dad even put my older sisters and I in private school was because busing was taking place. So even my dad, who wasn't like the super political guy, he was like, I'm not putting my kids on a bus at 6 a.m. to be carted off across town to go to a school where there's going to be hostility. I don't want my kids to be a social experiment. Right. So I had, I had to have my first communion and stuff like that. But then once that was all kind of like water under the bridge and we were like, okay, we can go to the local school up the road. We never went to church after that. I had like a religious awakening in 7th grade, and my mom took me probably for a few months. And, it takes work and it takes support, and, it takes really a familial thing to make, faith flourish, I think, in a really productive way. And I didn't have that. And my parents would call themselves Christians. They would call themselves Catholics, but we were not churchgoers, Bible readers, talking about God on a daily basis.
It's funny that you say that, and I'm going to hit a bullseye for some of our listeners, and I'm probably going to piss a couple of them off as well, but it wouldn't be a show if we didn't piss somebody off.
Correct.
But I was a kid, and I grew up in a Catholic neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And everybody in our neighborhood went to church every week. But you would drive by the Catholic church on Sunday morning at Mass time. Uh-huh. There were 3 cars in the parking lot. Yeah. Everybody went up on Tuesday for the spaghetti dinner. Everybody went up on Friday for the fish fry. Everybody went up on Thursday for bingo. Everybody went up on the Saturday that they had what they called Holy Casino Night. And yes, they literally set up a casino in the basement.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the priests had what was called the Holy Smokers group. And he would take these mission trips, and he would come back with these cigars from these exotic places. And some of the men, would pay like $10 a week to go and, smoke these fancy cigars with him. And, and their parking lot was full for all of that stuff. Right. And so all of my neighbors, I could safely say, went to church at least once a week for something. Mm-hmm. But it was never Mass. It was never the weekly sermon.
Right.
Your parents may have been good Catholics and y'all didn't realize it. So
yeah, who knows? We talk about it more now. And that, going back to my dad, he has this repellence of authority, not God, but like the church and the hierarchy and stuff like that. So my dad has kind of this libertarian streak in him that I got, and I'm not anti-authority. Okay. I believe in order. I believe, in gender roles. I believe in God obviously being at the top, and I believe in oxygen. That's an authority. Right. But, I am repellent to authority that pretends to be benevolent. And right. It is not. And then it steals stuff. I don't like that either.
So when you describe yourself before becoming a Christian and as a college student as an atheist,
yeah.
Do you think that you were an atheist when you went to college, or do you think the University of Wisconsin took you from being unconcerned about religion to being an atheist?
Oh, obviously. I mean, I was just putty in their hands. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things when raising my children, obviously I want them to think like me as much as possible, because I have made mistakes, and I feel as if I've gotten to a point where I know not all truth, but a lot of truth, and I've learned it the hard way, and I don't want them to have to make those mistakes. But we know human beings sometimes want to figure things out on themselves, but I want them to have the rhetorical tools to be prepared, the armor of God, to be prepared to take on the hostile atheism, the statism, the leftism, the white guilt stuff shoved in people's faces, or men are toxic. I mean, the world is coming at my children. I have 3 boys, and I want them to not be putty in people's hands like I was. I was absolutely just a sponge soaking it all in because I thought it was truth. And I guess I've always had this. That's why I wanted to be a journalist, right? I wanted to figure things out and, get through the weeds and figure out what's really happening, facts, right? Data, the true experiences, how things really happen, not just one side of the story, or, the part of the other side of the story is completely gone or misrepresented. So, yes, UW-Madison just was putting their hands. However, in the 90s, there were people in my classes who didn't agree with the professor, and nobody was being pepper sprayed or anything like that. So in my alma mater's defense, most people thought like me, but there could be dissent. And that's one of the things that is just truly sad about how our culture has gone. It's just no fun. I mean, I like debating with people. I don't want to just be told what to do. And if you disagree with me, I want to know why, right? I obviously have changed my mind over the years. Maybe somebody could change my mind again, but nobody even is willing to have an open mind. And it's just really sad for civilization.
Let's pause here for a minute, and we'll pick this thought back up as soon as we hear a brief commercial from our sponsor, the Barnes Review. If you love listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, then I know that you'll love reading the Barnes Review. The Barnes Review is one of my favorite magazines. I began reading the Barnes Review long before they became a sponsor here on the program. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There's just not a more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So if you'll visit www.barnesreview.org, that's www.barnesreview.org, you can find out how you too can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review by mail, or you can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review electronically in PDF editions. Or you can subscribe to receive both. That's what I do. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. Well, when I was in high school, and George H.W. Bush was running for president.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really have an official Young Republicans Club in our high school. We had kind of an unofficial, I guess you could say, Young Republicans Club. There were about a dozen of us that just sort of hung out together, and we were, fairly active in discussion and activity. And so George H.W. Bush was coming to town on a campaign stop. And it was a very restrictive thing, and you had to have tickets, and it was a fundraiser, and I don't know how, but one of our teachers, he taught history and economics at the high school, and then he also taught the same classes at the college level.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would teach at the high school in the morning, and then in the afternoon he would go and teach in the college. And very, very, very liberal man. Extremely liberal man. But somehow or another, he scored tickets to this fundraiser, this Republican fundraiser. And I remember that he rented a bus. And he took, and all of us who were in this, what we'll call unofficial Young Republicans Club, all took one of his classes. And he took us to this fundraising dinner.
Wow.
And arranged for us to actually get FaceTime with George H.W. Bush. I guess he called somebody in the Bush campaign and told them he was going to bring some high school students. And so George Bush gave us a few minutes of FaceTime.
Wow, that would never happen today.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. A person who was, and he was even the chairman, I believe, or the co-chairman of our county's Democrat Party.
Right.
And yeah, today that would not happen.
They'd put you on a bus so you could go and do something wild there and break windows and stuff. That's what you'd be on the bus for.
Yeah. So, the whole mentality of liberalism has changed, and I don't know if maybe he was more, as you said before, of a liberal in the classic sense.
Yeah.
And so maybe you still had a few of those professors left at University of Wisconsin when you were there.
Yeah, and I really did. I look back now and think about it, and I did, and that's important, and that's sad that they were feeding my critical thinking, even though I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean, they were kind of doing both. That they were saying, yeah, you should believe this, but why? Really think why, and that's when you're writing research papers about how great all this stuff is, and whatever. Only reading, radical feminists or whatever. But yeah, people don't have that anymore. Well, some people, who are, after school with their kids, or really, take them on history trips, or people who homeschool, or grandparents sometimes will step in if, their kids getting a bunch of bunk at school. So it happens, but not across the board, obviously.
So when you were at University of Wisconsin, was Donna Shalala still teaching women's studies classes, or had she already gone to work for the Clinton administration?
No, she was, I think, my first or second year. She was the, not the dean.
I know she became the president at one point.
Yeah, she was the president. I think she was for just like 1 or 2 of my years, and then she went off and did something else. But yeah, she was not teaching.
Okay. So now you've gone the exact opposite of that. Well, before I ask this question, did you learn political activism at the University of Wisconsin, or was it strictly academic?
It was strictly academic. I don't even remember really participating like in a rally or anything. Kind of just your existence in Madison is kind of activism, because you're wearing your T-shirts and, there's flyers up all over the place, and everybody in the coffee shops are talking their, Marxist stuff or whatever. But my dad says I wanted to do something once with homeless people, like go sleep in the park. I do not remember that at all. But, mostly it was like writing letters and signing petitions and stuff. I mean, yeah, I didn't do anything wild. I had some friends that had participated in some stuff, but by the time I was hanging out with them, they were too mellow to do that. We talked a lot, but we were more academic. Right. Now, that's not to say there weren't activists there, but it wasn't like everybody was a raging activist going around, in their brown shirts wanting to smash things, It was, people talked.
Right. So then it isn't like the things that you're doing now. You just woke up one day and having learned how to be an activist on the left, you woke up one day and said, well, how can I do this on the right now?
Well, I just wanted to write, with a W.
Okay.
Because I had gotten this journalism degree when I was pregnant with my first child. I was working at the local paper. I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. By that point, I was already like conservative lady. We're going to have, one of us staying home. My husband makes more money than me, so obviously it was going to be me. Looking back now, I'd be like, I was obviously going to be me because I'm the mom. I'm the nurturer. But anyway, at the time, we were like still kind of sort of liberalish in our thinking. But anyway, so, I quit my job to be a stay-at-home mom. Well, I had 3 kids in diapers by the time, 3 years past that, because I had a son, and 16 months later I had twins. So there was no writing or doing anything like that. I did have a little family blog, where I would just go on for the grandparents. Hey, this is what they're doing, and they're saying these things. But I wasn't writing. And so throughout this, my oldest is 10, throughout my 10 years as a parent, I wanted to write something. And then I finally got on Facebook in 2013. I was super late to Facebook. And, I just was like, what is this thing? What are all these crazy people saying? So I would do, try to have these arguments on Facebook, which is just pointless. I mean, it's just everybody in their echo chamber. And unless you're parroting whatever the people say, it's pointless. It's really hard. So
I was 3 years later to Facebook than you were, so.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, I know people who've been on there for a long time. But anyway, so, my husband and I would just have these conversations. He's been very supportive. I could not do this without him. But, I wanted to get back to writing because that's what I love. That's how I communicate best. I've never considered myself a very good verbal speaker, which was one of the reasons I got into journalism. But there are things that need to be said that just aren't said. And so he pushed me to do the blog, and we talked about it for a couple of years. I don't have time, well, it's one of those things like having kids. You're never going to have the time or money to have kids, but you do it because it's a good thing. So anyway, it was 2 Decembers ago. I had a friend who helped me with the graphic designs and all this kind of stuff, and we launched it. And it's really hard to have the time to sit down and write about what I want to write. I have probably 100 blogs in the works that I just can't sit down and be uninterrupted. But I do it and I make it happen. And I didn't really go into this with the intent to be like, Southern tradition activist, but it's kind of become that way just because of the world we live in. You constantly have to resist all the craziness and the outright fallacies, and it's hate. It is just so much hate towards Southern people, and it's uninformed. And I know people don't want to listen, but there are a few people out there who are willing to listen and can have their minds changed. But I also want to encourage people in the boat of being a stay-at-home mom or a homeschooling mom or a Southern traditionalist or just a traditionalist, Christian. We need to speak up. We can do it. My motto is be bold but loving. Truth is offensive in the year 2018, but I'm not going to stop speaking truth just because people don't like it. Do you know? I have that stubbornness that so many Southerners have. I get it from my dad too, and I want to use it in a way to speak up for people and not help people know that we're going to be called names anyway. So, why pussyfoot around the issues? Just
Right.
Speak truth, be factual. If you're not being called a racist in 2018, you're doing something wrong. It's just, you're doing nothing, or you're just, going along with the crowd. And I was on the left. I've been to the dark side, and the Marxists, you will get no passes for selling out your people. You will get no passes for throwing Southern people under the bus, or white men under the bus, or, breeders under the bus. That's what they call people who have children. You will get no pass if they fully get the reins of power. They'll be the first to go, as all the people who aren't 100% who they are, the way they look, where they're from, their socioeconomic background. They'll be the first to be purged out of it. Just because you're an ally to hateful people doesn't mean they're not going to hate you and kill you eventually, or put you in a gulag, or whatever they're going to do. Hopefully not.
Let me stop you there for just a second. We need to cut to a commercial. This is a message from our sponsor, the American Free Press. As soon as we hear from the American Free Press, we'll be right back with our guest, the Dissident Mama.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are because you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. You like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States, the things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. AFP is the preeminent alternative independent news source. AFP is the antithesis of the controlled, lamestream media. AFP is employee-owned and has been so since its founding. Because of that, AFP never has and never will allow advertisers or special interests or big money to dictate what appears in the pages of the American Free Press newspaper. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP covers the stories and tells the truth that the lamestream media is frankly scared to touch, and AFP offers real, on-the-scene reporting and commentary, the likes of which you will never see in the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, or just about any other lamestream news source that you can think of. That's right, there's only one national populist news weekly staffed by an unsurpassed team of veteran investigative journalists who will dare to rip the veil off of many of the major news stories that are being censored and suppressed by the big money controlled media monopoly. And that's the American Free Press. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
And we're back with Dissident Mama, Rebecca. Maybe
Yes.
you could help us get into the mind of a liberal woman for a second.
Okay.
Because
Do
Nancy
you want to
Pelosi...
go there? It's scary.
Yeah. Nancy Pelosi made a statement not too long ago about how Donald Trump's whole plan is president is to make America, a country of of rich white people, and how she's against that. And
Well,
I'm
she's
thinking,
married to a rich white guy.
and I'm thinking, yeah, she's a rich white person married to a rich white guy. Does she not realize that she's slitting her own throat here?
She thinks she's an ally. And, nobody cares for old Nancy Pelosi. Seriously.
I'm just trying to figure out how she can think the way she thinks. I'm just trying to get in her head here.
Well, I mean, she's just spouting the talking points. I think to give herself cover and, to give herself FaceTime and, the Huffington Post or whoever talks about Nancy Pelosi these days. Lord knows who would ever want to read that woman or listen to her. But
maybe I shouldn't interrupt you here with this.
What?
Because this is a Christian show and a family show, but we won't get we won't jump too deep into this hole.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I saw a video of her a while back where it had something to do with immigration and DACA. I don't remember. You may have seen it. And she wasn't as radical as all the the DACA people, the dreamers there chanting and screaming, and they were yelling stuff at her. Yeah. I don't remember exactly what she wasn't saying that wasn't to their liking, but even Nancy Pelosi is not left enough for, Marxists.
I remember that. I don't remember what it was that she wasn't saying, but I do remember that incident.
Yeah.
But Nancy Pelosi is suing a hospital out in California.
Oh, really?
Yes.
For what?
Because her husband had surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And they've not had relations since the surgery.
Oh.
And so Nancy Pelosi is suing the hospital because they did something to diminish his drive.
Oh, his toxic masculinity.
Yes. And the hospital's attorneys have replied to the lawsuit. And their reply was that if the hospital had done anything to diminish his drive, it was an unforeseeable consequence to cataract surgery. Because as far as they're concerned, the only thing that they had done was correct his eyesight.
Wow. Okay, cataract surgery.
Yeah. So, waiting to see if that lawsuit goes anywhere or not.
Yeah, but according to the feminists that Nancy Pelosi loves so much, men aren't necessary anyway. What's the old saying that a man, what is the feminist saying? A man is unnecessary to a woman like a bike is to a fish or something. I don't know. It's some t-shirt they all wear. Well, obviously men are necessary to Nancy Pelosi. So, that's the thing with the modern feminists is they say they want to be left alone. But then, they write these articles about 100 things that men can do to make their lives easier, right? Mm-hmm. They want sensitive men, they say, more feminine men, and then they marry these wussy guys, and then they cheat on them. It's like they actually want strong men. They're still attracted to strong men. So and then they say, oh, we want to be free and we want to work. And then they go work in a cubicle and never see their kids and they're miserable. So, they're bipolar. I don't know. Other than that, they like to say things because they want to be in the in crowd, and then they actually live them out and they experience them and don't make the connect that it is the very thing they're pushing that's making them utterly unhappy.
Right.
It's a sickness. I don't get it. Stockholm syndrome, maybe. Who knows?
So I'm going to ask you a personal question, and if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to.
Okay.
And the answer may or may not even be there, depending on the timing of it. When you found yourself about to have your first child, had you already become a Christian at that point, or were you still? Okay. So then the question might not be relevant then. Those of us on the right, we think of about asking women, what went through their mind to make them have an abortion. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the question that I like to ask women on the left to get them to think is, what made them decide to keep their child?
Yeah.
It's a reverse thought process for them, but I don't know that would be a relevant question with yourself.
Yeah, I know plenty of women who, have suffered through what abortion is. And women are the victims, but, they have chosen to be victimized because it is just horrible, obviously, physically for them. But spiritually, studies have been done on this stuff. They're more prone to eating disorders. They're more prone to suicide, getting into relationships where they're either the abuser or want to be abused. When they become parent, they become like these helicopter moms that want to do everything perfect because they're trying to make up for the fact that they killed one of their children. It is a rabbit hole. It's horrible. But I think a lot of them, do it back in the day when they're wild and they're partying and that kind of stuff. And then they hit a point where they're like, oh, well, I've already had one or two. I may as well keep this one. I guess that's what the people who are still leftist feminists think. Mm-hmm. But for me, my husband and I, had planned. We were like, we want to have kids and we want to have them close together so we can homeschool them. Like, we were already like gung-ho conservative people by that point. We had, we're going to a really conservative church. And, so I didn't have my first child till I was 36. So I wasted all those good procreative years that I could have been having more babies. But I did get 3 out. But yeah, I think just a lot of people just get to the point where they're like, they don't even think of it like maybe a life. They just think, oh, I've done this other thing. Let's try this new thing.
Yeah. They don't realize that new thing or let's try this, that it's at least 18 years.
Yes. Heck, by modern standards, their kids will be living with them until they're 40. So
yeah.
Mine won't. They're hitting the road at 18. Mm-hmm. But they're going to be men and they'll be able to handle it. So hopefully this is the path we're on.
Speaking of birthdays, our friend John Schneider, you remember him? He was Bo Duke on the Dukes of Hazzard. We interviewed him a few weeks ago here on the program. He wants to invite all of our listeners to his birthday party. His birthday party is coming up on Saturday, April 7th. And so we're going to break for about a 60-second commercial so that John Schneider can invite us to his birthday party, and then we'll be back with Dissident Mama.
You want to feel like a kid again? You ever see a car fly? I mean really fly. Well, Saturday, April 7th and Sunday, April 8th, you'll have that opportunity out here at John Schneider Studios in Holden, Louisiana for Bo's Extravaganza. Music, food, family fun, car chases, NASCAR drivers, Duck Dynasty, Dukes of Hazzard, it's all here. We're going to have food. We're going to have music. We're going to have stunts. We're going to have car chases. We're going to have car shows. We're going to have car races. And my special birthday gift to me, I am finally going to jump a General Lee right in front of your very eyes. You won't want to miss this. April 7th and April 8th at John Schneider Studios. Bo's Extravaganza. Get your tickets right now. Come on out and have a great time with your family and your friends. Kids 10 and under are free. And remember, I am going to finally jump a General Lee. You do not want to miss that. I'll see you Saturday, April 7th and Sunday, April 8th at Bo's Extravaganza. John Schneider Studios, Holden, Louisiana. See you here.
So let's go ahead and talk about your blog, specifically your Dissident Mama website. Is that pretty much the hub of your activity, or is that just one bigger piece of a puzzle? Or
that's it. And so, I'm on Gab and Twitter and Facebook as Dissident Mama, and then, my website. And then I've gotten some articles picked up by Abbeville Institute, but they're exactly what's on my blog. Brian McClanahan, who runs the blogging part of that website, will change the title sometimes, but it's the same thing. And then, I've been on a couple like libertarian podcasts and stuff, but my hub is dissidentmama.net.
Okay.
And then going back to the Facebook thing and, getting angry at people on there is that's another thing that like, I wanted to have like personal relationships with people on like my normal Facebook page where like church people are and family members and old ladies I know. And, sometimes you don't want to be shoved. You don't want people's politics shoved in your face all the time, and sometimes I don't want to know what other people are thinking because I'm like, gosh, I really like that person. I really hate that they want to take my guns away, stuff like that. It's like, it'll be like people you go to church with. So that's another reason I kind of decided to have like this alter ego, was so I could be very truthful and also maybe not get my husband in trouble, who has a very corporate job, for like having this insanely radical life, according to modern standards.
Okay. Well, I find it funny, and I told you a little bit of the story, off radio here earlier. But the church that I'm pastoring, one of the reasons that they called me was because I campaigned so actively for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. The church that I had candidated, that I was seeking the position at, they didn't want me for the same reason. And it's funny because the other church was very much advertises itself as a fundamentalist church.
Right.
And I literally asked one of the leaders, one of the deacons in the church, I point blank to his face, asked him, I said, how can you claim to be a fundamentalist and vote for Hillary Clinton?
Right. What was his answer?
He walked away.
Right.
But, so I can't understand people. Now I remember back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, I remember the Catholic Church began calling the politicians within it to account. And I remember Nancy Pelosi was one of them, in fact, that the bishop basically told her that if she was going to be for abortion, she could consider herself, persona non grata at the communion table.
Right.
And she, rather than toe the line on the life issue, she just decided she wasn't going to take communion or go to church anymore.
Can you imagine? That's craziness.
Yeah. And so, I know that the Catholic, in the Catholic religion, I know that they've tried to bring some of their politicians to account. But for whatever reason, sadly, the Baptists, of which I have been for all of my Christian life, and other groups like Presbyterians and so forth, that we would consider to be politically to the right, do not seem to have the same courage.
Oh, absolutely.
And I wish that they did, but they don't seem to have the same courage. We have a lot of people in the pews of our very seemingly conservative churches who are very liberal. And first of all, I wonder how they could divorce their religion and their politics the way they have to do it, because if they're truly a Christian, you would think that that would be an impossible thing to do.
They can twist things very skillfully. It's really amazing. Well, there's litmus tests now, social justice litmus tests for being a mainline Christian in America. And it's not, is Jesus the Son of God? Did he die and did he raise again? Is there, everlasting life through believing in him? Are you a Trinitarian believing Christian, right? It is, do you have white guilt? It is, do you think women have, the right to, kill the unborn? It is pandering to, multiculturalism and diversity and all this stuff. I mean, to a point where I had to leave I had to leave it. I could not take it any longer. It is the whole flag thing with the SBC just enraged me, and then the church I was going to is SBC affiliated. They call themselves like non-denominational, but they're SBC affiliated. Somehow they're under that umbrella. I don't understand how all that works. But anyway, they didn't say anything about the flag, so we kept going there. And then the whole the whole what was it? The thing they did at the last the thing they did at the last convention were saying anti-black racism is the worst thing in the world, and white supremacists are running around everywhere and everyone's a Nazi and all that kind of thing. McKissick, whatever his name is, he wrote that. Right. And I had already left by then, but that was just like the nail in the coffin for me. I can't take that anymore. Even after Charlottesville, everybody had to put out their statement that, racism is the worst thing in the world. I am not a racist by the traditional definition. I am a meritocratic person. I try to judge people on who they are. But, they act like racism is the worst thing in the world, but only for white people. Everybody else can be racist because of systemic oppression and, colonialism and the sin of slavery and all this kind of stuff. It is just a ruse, and white people buy into it, and good, nice white people buy into it. And that's some of the people I want to wake up. I don't want to say go out and punch people, but I want to say wake up. Christianity is not a suicide pact. It is not a suicide pact. Right. I actually asked my priest that after Charlottesville. I'm like, what's the deal with this? And he said, absolutely not. Some people are called to be martyred. Some people want to be pacifists, but Christianity has martial saints, so you do what your gifts lead you to do. So I don't know. Some people just want to sit back and be rolled over by this whole horrible cultural Marxist thing that, it only leads to death because it is just nihilistic at its core. And I'm like, if you have children or grandchildren, I just don't understand how you could buy into it other than it's self-serving for you in the here and the now, which is selfish, which to me is completely the opposite of what Jesus taught. Right. So
I say you wrote in your last blog, at least the last one that I read, you were writing about how Puritanism was actually the seedbed for the Yankees.
Yeah.
And so, that was kind of, Christianity gone awry, if you will, in the antebellum period that caused a lot of the problem even then. In other words, it wasn't just like, churches, we're talking about how could these churches spin off to the left like they have been. Apparently they were doing it even 150 years ago, 180 years ago, 200 years ago.
Yeah, and, the Congregationalism came down in the South too, but I still think it goes back to why I'm writing a 5-part series on this, because it has been so intense. Going back to, people coming to Jamestown and people coming to Massachusetts and how they were different, and then everything that has happened since that, where they came from, what kind of Christians they were. You had Anglicans in the South and you had Puritans in the North. And so, yes, Congregationalists came down here, people became Presbyterians and Baptists, but I still think it was more like a quiet faith in the South, because the Puritans were like always these reform-minded people, always purifying, always changing, not having roots, where in the South we know roots were very big. So even if people were going to, a Baptist church, which, grew out of, Puritanism or whatever, there were still traditions that people held on to that helped keep some of the progressivism at bay. That's kind of, because I know that some people get upset. They're like, well, I go to a Baptist church and, Stonewall Jackson was a Presbyterian or whatever. I get that, but it's because it was a different kind of people who weren't trying to, they wanted to be fishers of men. Yes, they wanted to go out into the world, but they didn't want to do it through force or through coercion or through collectivism. It was really a more personal thing, I think, to most Christians in the South, which is why Catholics were, welcomed in the South, and Flannery O'Connor loved the South, because she felt like she wasn't gonna, be run out on a rail like the Salem witch trials. She could be there and she could make it her home, and she could have deep, meaningful conversations with people about it, that it wasn't like they were always trying to change her mind. They could meet on a common ground, which I think is, shockingly to some people, a very Southern thing.
Right.
Getting along with people, we've been a diverse people for a long time. It wasn't just people from England, the Irish and the Scottish and, the people in Appalachia were different than the people in Tidewater. And, this has been written about a bunch. But then obviously hanging out and living with and going to church with, in many instances, African people, so yes, it was not some utopia of, everybody loving each other to a degree of, there was no animosity, right? But, people tried to get along, because there was order, there was hierarchy, and there was a respect of trying to make things work, not breaking everything and starting from scratch or going nowhere,
Right. Well, I know that people are often surprised to find out the prominent roles that black people played in the Old South and in the Confederate government even.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I love doing my blog is I don't know all this stuff, and it's so nuanced isn't even the right word. It's so deep and it's so interesting. That part of history that completely just wants to be, categorized in this box of, North, awesome, Abraham Lincoln, great emancipator, every Southerner, horrible, evil person. It's amazing to find out some of the things that happened during that time. And, I found out there's some good Northerners too, so it's, I bash Yankees, but in my blog that I'm working on right now that I can never get done, apparently, when I say Yankee, it's more like a state of mind. When I say Southerner, it's more a state of mind, because my brother-in-law calls himself Asian Virginian. He wasn't even born in Virginia, but he loves Virginia, and he is one of the most conservative, I'll call him a neo-confederate. He loves the South, and he wasn't even born here. And that's another thing. We need to just take back neo-confederate. I want to get a shirt that says neo-confederate and proud. I don't care what the SPLC says, kind of just steal their words back from them. But, and then, of course, I have neighbors who are from Massachusetts who love the South. They named their daughter Dixie. They love NASCAR. They don't spit on being from the North, but they like it here because they think it's better, so, right, I talk in these terms, but, it's for fun,
right,
and it's for ease, but, I'm going to flesh it out a little bit more in this one, because, some of my biggest influences aren't even from the South. So, what are you going to do with that? It's really a live and let live thing, and wanting to hang on to history and tradition. And that's important, I think, to civilization. And anybody who's on board with that must be a neo-Confederate.
Right. Well, did you, you said you grew up in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't really consider Virginia to be a southern state. I know that geographically it's in the South.
Oh, come on!
But most of the people that I've met, you're one of the few people I've met in Virginia who was actually a conservative or really in tune with their southern roots. And I think part of the reason is because we've had so many federal employees living in the state for so many generations, and they've procreated.
Well, you are right to a degree. Like in the 80s, people in Richmond made fun of Northern Virginia. We called it like Little Washington and said like we should secede from it and all this kind of stuff back when people were cool in Richmond. But you're right. Richmond, I use this term because it is true. It has been colonized with crazy people who absolutely hate everything wonderful about Virginia. This rich, wonderful 400-year history. And they're just like, no, we want to build shopping malls and come here for low taxes and then vote for, laws to raise taxes, and crazy stuff like that, that whole carpetbagger mentality. But, there's still, I'd say it's probably older people that still hang on to it, but they don't speak up about it, which is one of the reasons colonization has been able to unfold. But there's still a contingency there because, I mean, as of this point, they're not touching the monuments on Monument Avenue. I think they're just adding context. And I am shocked, honestly. I'm honestly shocked that they're not coming down because Richmond with VCU and the art school and a lot of people that I went to high school with, they're just quislings. I mean, well,
as I understand it, the mayor wants to take them down, but he wants the state to pay for it, and the state doesn't want to pay for it.
Right.
And so that's why he's adding context, because apparently that's about the only thing he thinks he can afford to do out of the city budget.
And, we should add context to, like the Lincoln Memorial or, any other, or the Sherman Memorial in New York City. I think that's one of the things we could do. I joke about like, hey, what would happen like if I went to my alma mater at the top of Bascom Hill at the University of Wisconsin? There's Honest Abe sitting there overlooking the city of Madison with all his grandeur. What if I went there and like spray painted it or like chopped his head off or something? Obviously, I wouldn't do it because I'm not a vandal, but like as a social experiment, see what would happen. Of course, I would not get off like those Marxists in Durham. I would not get a slap on the wrist. I would probably be in jail for a very long time. So my husband's like, yeah, don't do that, honey. But we could try to get context added to things, I don't even know how you would go about doing that, but kind of play their game. And that's what my last blog was about. We're playing a game of nice, polite people who expect people on the other side to embrace logic and civility and manners. And that is not the enemy. I mean, they are not nice people. And I'm not saying we need to lower ourselves to their level and become, violent vandals, but we need to be smarter in trying to challenge them and use some of the tools they use against them.
Right.
And I don't know how that's going to play out, but I want people to start thinking like that because there's a lot of smart people on our side, on the right, and it's a big tent. It's Christians, there's some atheist libertarians, there's pro-Southern people, but there's people who aren't necessarily pro-Southern, but they're limited government, or heck, they're pro-secession now. I think this is a point where we could get a lot of smart people who are very frustrated to do something because we're all like, what can we do? Well, what can we do? I don't know. There's something we can do, but we've got to stop playing the game of being the nice guy and getting run over because that ain't going to work.
Unfortunately, Rebecca, that's all the time that we have today for this episode. But I definitely want to bring you back again because there were so many things that I wanted to ask you and so many subjects that I wanted for us to talk about that we've just not gotten to. And so I don't know if it'll be next week or if it'll be here in a couple weeks. But we're going to finish this conversation, and so we're going to have you back as a guest again on an upcoming episode, and you'll be only the second person so far to have become a second episode guest. And so I'm looking forward to our continuation of the conversation. Thank you again, Rebecca, for being with us today. And as we do come to the end of the broadcast, I would like to encourage you to visit Rebecca's website, dissidentmama.net, dissidentmama.net. Also, go to our website, www.dixieheritage.net, www.dixieheritage.net. When you're there, you can request a free copy of my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. I'd love to send you a copy absolutely free, no cost, no obligation. All you have to give me is your email address. You don't even have to give me your postal address or your credit card or anything like that. I'll send you a PDF copy of the book that you could read on your phone, on your tablet, or on your computer. When you request your free copy of the book, you'll also be signed up for our weekly newsletter, the Dixie Heritage Letter. Again, absolutely free. You'll never be charged a dime. We'll never ask you for anything. We just want to put the information in your hands every week, every Friday, and we know that it'll be a blessing to you. Go to the Barnes Review website and check out the Barnes Review. TBR Radio presents the Dixie Heritage Hour would not be possible week after week if not for the generosity of the Barnes Review, so definitely go and check out that website. And also send me an email, director@dixieheritage.net, director@dixieheritage.net. Let me know who you are. Let me know where you live. Let me know that you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour. And I'd love to hear from you. Also, maybe you've written a book. Maybe you're involved in Southern heritage in a way that we don't realize. Maybe you're a subscriber to the Dixie Heritage Letter, and I just haven't had the privilege of getting to know you yet. But you think you have something to contribute, something to bring to the table, and you would like to be a guest on an upcoming episode of the Dixie Heritage Hour, let me know. Send me an email. We'll talk. So until next week, God bless.